So apparently there is a massive bidding war going on right now over the rights to Britney Spears' memoir, The Woman in Me, which would mean that we could be very, very close to getting an actual Britney Spears biopic based on her own accounting. There are some huge production companies interested, including Reese Witherspoon's and Margot Robbie's Lucky Chap, Brad Pitt's as well, but I'm way less interested in his take on this story. He is obviously one of the most iconic people who has ever lived, and like her era, like the early 2000s, was one of the most wild times in pop culture history. So I need the artistic vision here to be absolutely perfect. Here are some immediate thoughts that I have. Only male director I would even consider for a project like this would be Pablo Larraín, and that's because he has a proven track record of telling incredible emotional stories about other icons in female history like Princess Diana and Jackie Kennedy. I do think that his style might be a little bit too subdued for this. I would like to see a little bit more of like a maximalist, hyper-stylized kind of vision for something that takes place in the early 2000s, but I do think he could tell a very beautiful story, a very emotional story, and I wouldn't be mad. I definitely wouldn't be mad if he ended up directing it. Another very interesting choice, I think, would be Amy Seimetz, kind of a redemption for how the idol got stolen from underneath her. She was already supposed to tell the story about a young pop star being disillusioned and broken by the industry, and I think that she would be a very, very interesting choice for this. Also, her feature film, She Dies Tomorrow, is incredibly contemplative. I think she has the ability, the range to do something that has broad mainstream appeal while also being like tapping into that like existentialism of the experience. I think that it could be very, very fascinating. Okay, now this one's more of a long shot because Julia Ducournau has obviously only made films in French. She's never made an English film or expressed any interest, as far as I know, in directing in English. But after Titan, I really think that she could do something really extraordinary with Britney's story. And I think a director who has experience in the horror genre would be particularly interesting for this project, because I think the tension and the predatory elements of this story could be framed in such a way that are truly terrifying. And I think that she could balance it well. And I don't know, I think it would be interesting as hell. Finally, maybe the most obvious choice for director, Emerald Fennell. I've seen Saltburn and it's incredible. I will have a review coming soon. But she has really distinguished herself as having a very clear and cool visual style. And she also has a very clear perspective. She's a writer-director, so I think like an auteur at the helm could be particularly advantageous in an adaptation like this. Ultimately, my biggest takeaway is that if this project gets made, it needs to be done with the utmost care. It needs to be handled absolutely perfectly, because Britney's story means so much to so many people, and that time was such a difficult time to be a woman, and she is perhaps the greatest example of how cruel the world can be to women, and she deserves her story to be told from people who understand it and are willing to listen to her perspective. So yeah, I hope it's done well. I think that as far as casting goes, I would love it if they could find a young unknown. I think that would really lend itself well to Britney's story, but I don't know. It could be cool. It makes me nervous because it's Hollywood, but we'll see.
What do you mean, what happened to PETA? The A at the end of his name is silent. His name is Pete. Greasy Say? Oh, she's immortal. Gail and Effie actually had a brief summer romance between the games. The mayor of District 7? Oh, yeah, he's pro-Brexit. No, I'm not homophobic. There's lots of gay people in my book series. Like President Snow, and President Coin, and Commander Thread, and Buttercup is actually Tigress, because Tigress has a blood curse that's been slowly turning her into an actual cat for years and years. What were the bathrooms like in the Capitol? Fuck, I didn't think about this. Well, I think that technology had probably progressed past a certain point of needing indoor plumbing, so I think that everyone just shat their pants where they stood and used the Capitol technology to vanish the evidence. Katniss actually has a second sibling who's never spoken about in the books. They were all given names of things that they needed to find in the wild in order to survive. What was her sibling's name? Marijuana. What happened after Katniss killed Coin? Nothing. Panem was exactly the same, and Katniss became a peacekeeper. Katniss doesn't marry PETA. She actually marries one of his brothers, and they name their son Gale Coriolanus Coin, after the 3 bravest men she ever knew. How did PETA get his name? Brad. Snow wasn't really that bad of a guy. He was just misunderstood. And he loved Prim like a daughter because she reminded him of his granddaughter. The types of tributes can be separated into 4 categories. The brave ones, the honest ones, the nerd ones, and the careers. The careers are the evil ones. The cornucopia uses they-them pronouns. Yes, I know a bow and arrow isn't the most efficient weapon to use in active combat, but she has one skill and she does it well. Lucy Gray is in the Peace Corps. President Coin was secretly pregnant with President Snow's baby.
Religion in Panem. Let's talk about religion in Panem. By the time that we reach the era of the Second Rebellion, religion seems to have fallen into obscurity in Panem, to the point that Katniss can't identify basic iconography of angels. And for a franchise that makes the effort to include a substantial amount of detail in regards to relatively minor facets of life in Panem, the absence of religion can't be anything but purposeful, which raises the question, why? Especially given the way that religion can be weaponized to maintain total control. And what this absence largely has to do with is the fact that Capital instates themselves as supreme authorities. They wish to display themselves as the highest power that anybody in the capital and districts has to report to. Even if they were to imply they were placed in their roles by divine figures, it'd still insinuate there are powers that be greater than theirs, and that's an unacceptable notion for their population to internalize. Additionally, religion also tends to be a common unifier, and if there's one thing that's dangerous to the capital, it's that. They cannot risk having the people of the districts be united by a common worldview. And in the way that religion can be used to indoctrinate people into capital beliefs, it can just as easily be used to radicalize people against the capital. People are infinitely more willing to risk their lives when they feel that death is not the final stop. Once again, making religion something capital authorities cannot tolerate under their rule. Let's talk about
Mutual might ask me to talk about religion in Panem, and Lucky Lefty has a really great video about this, so I'll link it down below. But in short, religion is a huge unifier and could not be tolerated by the capital. But I highly, highly doubt that the capital was able to obliterate it completely. While any mention of the Covey and who they were was completely obliterated, their songs weren't, and they lasted until the 75th games. And there are thousands of religious hymns and things that I think would definitely stand the test of time, especially because they are things that a lot of people tend to sing during the hardest times. I also think about how religion can frequently be used as a tool to radicalize people, and could really easily be used as a tool to get people to join the rebellion. I wouldn't be surprised if it was used to get people to start talking about what was wrong with the capital. We could also consider the formation of new religions. Regardless of who is in control, lots of people experience unexplainable things on a daily basis, or things that could only be described of as miracles. And so I'm sure that there were some more belief systems that were born or reborn. There was also a lot of substance use, and experiencing something like that in a group of people can often create what can only be described as a religious experience. So even though the capital tried to obliterate it, I'm sure that it still existed. But what I would be interested to see is what happened to religion after Mockingjay. Were there people who were practicing their faith underground who were able to practice freely? Was religion truly somehow completely wiped out and people started to actually question themselves for the first time? Were there other countries outside of Panem that practiced different things that they had never heard of? You never know. It's interesting to think about. How does Katniss know the Hanging Tree song that Lucy Gray sings in A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes? Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes book spoilers. In A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, Lucy Gray writes the Hanging Tree song to sing to Coriolanus Snow to try and ask him to run away with her. And 60 years later, this song becomes a symbol of the rebellion. But how did she know it? Katniss learned the song from her dad. And her dad was said to have a really special talent to be able to just hear a song a couple of times and then imitate it. Kind of like a Mockingjay. He is also from the Seam. Lucy Gray's family is also from the Seam. And Lucy Gray's cousin, Maud Ivory, was said to have a special talent to only be able to hear a song a couple of times and then imitate it. Kind of like a Mockingjay. Maud Ivory's other favorite song was also Deep in the Meadow. You know that one. That was a song that Prim loved to hear. So although nothing is specifically said in the books, Katniss either learned the song because it was like passed down through her family and she is related to Lucy Gray in some way, or the songs that the Cubby brought to District 12 just resonated and stayed. Because the Cubby weren't the only people who knew these songs and sang these songs, even the Peacekeepers knew them. It's highly likely that these songs made their way out to other districts and into the capital as well. I hold the probably unpopular opinion that the Hunger Games reapings are rigged, and that Prim's name was pre-selected. And a lot of people told me that this defeats the purpose of the story because Katniss isn't a chosen one, and this is supposed to be something that could have happened to anybody. I don't think the reapings being rigged makes Katniss a chosen one. And I also don't think the capital expected Katniss to volunteer. A lot of people who believe the reapings are rigged think the Capitol did it in order to get Katniss to volunteer, and I don't think that's the case. Nobody had ever volunteered in 12. Even though Katniss was like a rule breaker and normally would protect her sister under any circumstances, she wasn't the only person who was like that for her family members. There's a million reasons why Prim could have been the name put into the bowl. It could be that Katniss's family is connected to the Covey, and Snow knew this and was directly targeting their family, and that he blew up Katniss's dad in the mines on purpose. It could have also been that they wanted to draw from a specific pool, like they wanted a 12-year-old. But to me, there are just too many coincidences in the reapings for me to think that they aren't rigged. Katniss mentions multiple times of Victor's children being reaped for the games, or siblings being reaped for the games, and the Capitol wants complete control over everything. They don't want to leave anything up to chance, especially because the tributes have to put forward an image, and the Capitol needs to protect that image, so they don't want people who are going to be unpredictable. And yes, people do volunteer in other districts, like the career districts, but those are also people who have been born and raised for this kind of position. They've already been taken into consideration as a role for the games. And again, if you don't hold this theory, that's fine. This is text that everybody can analyze differently because it's a work of fiction. But I don't think that the reapings being rigged takes away from the overall message of the game, that this could happen to anybody and everybody is a victim of the games. And the entire country is an arena. The TV show and the tributes are just supposed to be a distraction. Did all of the houses in all of the districts in the Hunger Games have recording devices in them, or was it just the Victor's Village? I question this a lot because we know that Katniss's house is bugged, but she also didn't necessarily have a reason to be paranoid about her house being bugged prior to winning the games. I personally think that if the houses were not all bugged, they were working towards that. Historically, the Capitol has had absolutely no qualms with secretly recording the district citizens. That's how we ended up getting the Mockingjay in the first place, because it didn't work. They didn't want anything that people could be aware of or take advantage of in any way. So the only way that they'd really be able to record what was going on in the districts and what the rebellion was doing is if nobody had any knowledge of where the recording device may be. And Beatty said he was working on a recording device that was the size of a piece of glitter. Like, you would never be able to find that in a house if you just like threw it in there somewhere. Especially considering how active the rebellion was before the 74th games, because it didn't become active when Katniss volunteered. It was very active before then, and then she volunteered, and then she became the Mockingjay. So I'm fairly confident that the Capitol already had wind of this, and they were really trying to survey the citizens. And not necessarily just to like watch them, but mostly just to make sure that they still had control over things. The idea of a panopticon is a running theme throughout the whole series, so I don't think it would be a far reach to think that even when they're not aware of the fact that they're being watched, they're still being watched. If the Hunger Games reapings were rigged, why would they have reaped Peeta? If you don't share this theory, that's okay. Please be nice. Very important thing about the Hunger Games that they talk about in A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is that there has to be an entertainment factor. There has to be a reason to watch, a person to root for. Morale was incredibly low in District 12. If Peeta and Prim had gone in together, the boy and the sister of the girl he was in love with all of his charisma and potential, I guarantee the Capitol citizens would have gone crazy for it. Because Peeta did love Katniss, and if he and Prim had gone into the games together, I feel like he still would have like announced on national television that he was in love with Katniss, because it was like his dying wish, or like his last thing that he wanted to get off his chest before he, went to the wolves. If they're rigged, I don't think they necessarily are just to punish a specific person for treason or for doing anything wrong. I think they probably either very strategically pick a specific person or pick from a specific pool of people, the way that most other reality TV shows do, based on how the Capitol citizens will engage with it and how the district citizens will respond to it. Like, especially leading up to Katniss going to the games, the rebellion was already like hot and bubbling. This had been in the works for years and years and years. She became the Mockingjay when she volunteered for her sister. That part about her wasn't predetermined. But if the rebellion was super active in 12 and the Capitol was trying to squelch it, they would probably want to have as much control over the drawings as humanly possible, which would also make Katniss volunteering for Prim like her first active rebellion, because it goes against their plan that they had already set. Something they don't say in the Hunger Games movies that they tell you in the book is that Katniss loses hearing in one ear when she's in the arena in the first games, and she has her
her ear like bionically repaired at the Capitol. But did you know that Jennifer Lawrence actually lost hearing in one ear during the filming for Catching Fire? According to Jennifer Lawrence, she had to jump into stagnant water for a stunt and it caused a really bad double ear infection. Then she had to jump into like water jets and it shot water into her ear. And then after that, she had like hearing loss in one ear. She said since filming that, she's had persistent ringing in her ears, which sounds like tinnitus, which is something I've had for my whole life and it's awful. She also almost unalived when they were filming Mockingjay. There's a scene where they're running around in the tunnels underneath the Capitol and they suddenly fill with smoke. And during filming, one of the fog machines malfunctioned and like started just pushing fog into the tunnel and everyone started choking. Like the scary part of it was there was a clear way to get to safety, but it was so foggy that nobody could see how to get out of the fog. And like obviously everyone was fine. It was just like scary, but I just find it interesting, and it's also one of those things that reminds me that I could never be an actor, because if I experienced anything like that on a regular basis, I would just give up.
Katniss wasn't given a boob job, but she was almost given a boob job. After the games, she talks about being in a borderline comatose state and vaguely hearing someone who sounded like Haymitch yelling, and not knowing what he was yelling about, but feeling really comforted and protected by him. Then, before she and Peeta reunite, she puts on her dress and notices that there's like significant padding because she's still emaciated from being in the arena. And Cinna tells her that the Capitol people wanted to surgically alter her and Haymitch would not have it. But they did do a lot of significant superficial procedures. They didn't only mend all of her wounds from the arena and get rid of all of the scars that happened there. They also got rid of any of the scars she had acquired prior to going into the arena. All of the marks of her hard work and her adventures out in the woods hunting. Like, she survived the arena, went into a comatose state, and woke up an entirely new person. And any evidence of any life she lived prior to entering the arena was completely erased from her body. Now when she looks down at her hands and sees that they're completely smooth instead of scarred, all she's going to remember is the Hunger Games arena, and the fact that the Capitol wants to put as much distance between Katniss and the districts as possible because of how much of a threat she poses to the Capitol.
It's already terrible that the Capitol traffics their victors after they escape the arena. But what makes it even worse is how frequent sex work was in the districts themselves. People were desperate. They were starving. And what is the one thing you have that you can sell at your lowest? In the first book, it talks about the starving girls of District 12 crowding around Commander Cray's house, desperate to do anything in exchange for something to eat. Katniss even says that if she had been older when her dad died, she might have been in that group of people. So imagine being in that situation where you are selling your body already just to survive. And then you get reaped into the arena, and then you escape the arena, and then your body is unimaginably altered against your will while you're asleep. And then when you finally wake up and you think it's over, and you're finally going to be stable, and you're not going to have to give yourself away in order to survive, that choice is taken away from you. Like Snow said, hope is the only thing greater than fear, and they will get the hopes of all of the victors up, only to drive home after they finally escape the arena that they need to be afraid every moment of their life. Not only does Peeta lose his leg in the first games, Katniss doesn't know that Peeta lost his leg until they reunite on live national television. And it's like a pretty big deal. There are some things that I understand why they didn't include them in the movie because of like budget stuff, but this really got me because it is a persistent part of his character throughout the series and is mentioned numerous times. It changes his gait. It changes his combat abilities and his training. It changes like every part of his life because he lost a leg. Like, that is a significant thing to go through. Not only because Peeta lost a leg and that's just an inherently traumatic thing to experience, but it also adds to everything Katniss owes him. Katniss sees herself as the reason why Peeta lost a leg, because she put a tourniquet on his leg. And there's already all kinds of things that are piling up in terms of what Katniss owes him. He gave her the bread. He saved her life numerous times. He was just a good, just, and kind person. And after everything he does for her, Katniss sees herself as the reason why he lost a limb. Like, he proved that he would quite literally give an arm and a leg for her. And what did she do?
The moment they announced that there could only be one winner, she drew her arrow at him. Like in Catching Fire, the movie doesn't really touch as much on how guilty Katniss is. Like, she is consuming herself with guilt about Peeta. And I think if they had included that he lost a literal limb in the movie, it would have been a lot more clear.
Peeta losing his leg was such an integral part of who he was as a character. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen somebody who's a healing amputee, but it takes a long time to be able to walk on a prosthetic leg. Even longer to do things like climb and run and swim, which Peeta isn't able to do when the second games start and Finnick has to go out and get him and bring him back to shore. Because it's only been a year since he had his leg amputated. That is an insanely short time to heal from something so invasive. When he hits the force field and his heart stops, it even talks about how his leg was twitching, and his inability to run from the smoke is ultimately what causes Mags to die. And throughout the series, Katniss is fixated on this debt that she owes Peeta because he gave her the bread that ultimately saved her life and led to her being able to hunt. And so every time Peeta is in any amount of danger, all of her thoughts circle back to how she's the reason for it. Peeta wouldn't have lost his leg if she hadn't tied the tourniquet. They wouldn't be in trouble with the Capitol if she hadn't introduced the idea of the berries. He wouldn't have had to go back into the games if Katniss had been more convincing that she was in love with him. And then Mags wouldn't have died in the first place. And Peeta wouldn't have been left behind in the arena. Like, it's literally such an integral part of the story, and I'm so upset the movies left it out because it almost makes the series an entirely different series when you read the books. When did the Capitol start having such advanced medical treatment? Where did they find the technology to heal scars and make everybody beautiful just days after getting out of the arena? On one hand, they could have always had this technology and they just perform surgeries on victors after the games depending on what type of image they want them to portray after the games. Not everybody gets beautified in the same way Katniss did. Inobaria won her games by ripping the throats out of her victims, and they shaved her teeth down to spikes afterwards to show how vicious she was. But I can almost guarantee that that was done without her consent after she got out of the arena. I think what the Capitol leaves you with after you get out of the arena is what they want you to strip your identity down to. Taff won his games with brute force by fighting. Totally plausible that they would want him to have prominent scars on his face to show an image of brute force and fighting. You have people like Haymitch, who, like Katniss, wasn't left with any extensive surgeries after the games that we know of, but did have everything taken away from him so that all he had left was the games, and all he had left to get rid of it was white liquor. I have another theory about the Capitol's development of plastic surgery, though. In A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, we know that the scientists perform experiments on Avoxes, making him into mutts, trying different torture techniques and things. So I'm guessing that they also did a lot of plastic surgery research on these people. I'm also guessing people like Tigress were used as like trial runs to experiment with all the trendy surgeries and things. Surgical alterations and making yourself look permanently visibly different is, outside of having enough food to eat, the only way the Capitol people can physically set themselves apart from anybody in the districts, because there's no way anybody in the districts would be able to afford such a frivolous surgery. So I think they also used the physical alteration of the victors and their teams to kind of influence or brand deal all the Capitol citizens into wanting to do the same thing, even if they themselves can't afford it, because we know a lot of the people in the Capitol are not well off. The Capitol citizens are meant to be portrayed as rich and high class to the people in the districts, but by no means are all of the people in the Capitol well off. It's said that jobs are really hard to come by in the Capitol, and a lot of people are deeply, deeply in debt because they can't afford their lifestyle. A lot of problems exist in the Capitol that also exist in the districts, but the people in the districts are extremely propagandized, and so are the people in the Capitol. The Capitol is only going to push an image to the districts of luxury and wealth, so that the districts don't think that the Capitol could have any kind of flaw in the system, or any form of weakness whatsoever. And once you realize that, it's a little bit easier to tell that Katniss is propagandized just as much as anybody else in the districts. She thinks that there's more than meets the eye, but she also takes things at face value a lot of the time. But the last thing the Capitol would ever want the district people to know is that there is any sort of instability among the Capitol citizens, because then the districts and the people of the Capitol would have something in common. And we know that the rebellion is already active in the Capitol during the games. So who knows what would have happened if people had figured out that the Capitol citizens were also being victimized by the same system. Stinky Harry Potter Lady can take a few pages out of Suzanne Collins's book for how to build a franchise, because I have never seen world building
so perfectly done to a point where you could genuinely read about any person who exists in this world, and it would be one of the most interesting things you could possibly read. Like, I used to be a Christian, okay? I have read the Bible cover to cover. I know how to analyze a text. And she does such a good job of covering plot holes and, like, covering her bases. When I read, I usually don't really like world-building books, not because I don't like world-building, but because I feel like it's so difficult to do. It reads as completely unbelievable a lot of the time, which is why I have a really hard time with, like, the Red Queen series and Harry Potter. I want to know everything about everybody in the Hunger Games. I want to know the upper, middle, and lower class experience of people in the Capitol. I want the perspective of an Avox working in the tunnels underneath the city. I want the perspective of the scientists working in the lab. I want an inside look at what the rebellion within the Capitol looked like. I want to see a perspective from every single district. I want to see what career training looks like. I want to see what the victors do together after the games. I want to see every year of the games. I want to see what happened before the first rebellion. I want to see what led to the creation of Panem in the first place. There's so much lore, and it's so well covered. And fanfiction is amazing, but I want Suzanne to expand this so badly it hurts. Caesar Flickerman, everybody's favorite Nepo baby. I have so many thoughts on Caesar Flickerman and so many more after learning about Lucky Flickerman in A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. But after watching Lucky, I think that I would probably compare Caesar Flickerman to a career. He was raised to become a tool to propagandize the Capitol. His fate and career were basically destined from day one. And it's not said whether or not he had a choice in the matter, but I'm guessing if he was used as such a powerful puppet to propagandize the entire nation, it probably wasn't something he necessarily sought out to do, considering how risky some of the higher up jobs in the Capitol were. We know that he came from a really privileged background, and I think like Effie, he might have had a kind of childlike innocence about him when it came to the games, because his whole job was to sensationalize it. That's all he knew. It's never specified whether Caesar survives the war or if he's killed in the bombings. Considering how important of an asset he was to the Capitol, I think that he probably had a lot of protections around him. And if he did survive, I often wonder what his fate was. If he was put on trial, if he was executed for treason, or if he was pardoned because he didn't actually feel any strong support one way or another. He was just doing everything he was told to do.
So it was just announced that Jenna Ortega is officially dropping out of Scream 7, and this is coming about 12 hours after the news that Melissa Barrera had been unceremoniously fired for her comments on Palestine. Despite the fact that there wasn't even a full 24-hour turnaround in these announcements, this was the second paragraph of the press release. This has nothing to do with the fallout from Melissa Barrera's firing. They are saying in major, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain energy. Yeah, it was just, you guys, it was just a big coincidence. It was just, I mean, you know, life's crazy that way sometimes, how you announce that you're firing someone unjustly and 12 hours later, scheduling conflicts arise. You know, that's just how it goes sometimes. It's honestly just kind of wild and disturbing to watch this happen in real time. Hollywood has really proven themselves to prioritize profit and greed over all else. And platform abusers and people who commit violent hate crimes, for example, just because they make them money. I mean, Mel Gibson got a show this year. So for them to take a beloved franchise that they actually successfully rebooted for a Gen Z audience, something that is not easy to do, and then completely alienated that audience just threw all of the money in the trash, is quite the choice to see them make. Because Scream 7, I'm so sorry, you've lost your audience. Like I'm not interested anymore, and I know Gen Z is not coming to support you. So I don't know. Good luck with that, I guess. If you are looking for a wonderful film to watch this weekend, though, might I recommend Carmen. Melissa Barrera gives an absolutely incredible performance. Paul Mescal is also wonderful. And it's an absolutely beautiful, incredibly emotional film that I can't recommend enough. So.
Now, why, oh why, are they throwing my girl with Downs in that arena?
I feel like it was such a good creative decision to cast so many more tributes with physical disabilities that, like, viewers can see. Like, between the little girl who has Down syndrome, who was a scene stealer, the boy with one arm, there was another boy who I think had one eye. Such a good creative decision, because The point of this movie, in comparison to the other Hunger Games movies, is that you're supposed to humanize the tributes a lot more. Like, that's why we get to spend so much more time with them. There's a lot more focus on their individual deaths. They all have names in the book, as opposed to in the original series when they were just sort of like District 7 boy, District 8 girl. The level of horror that you get as a viewer when you see tributes reaped who have physical disabilities is that much more elevated, because in the world we live in, we're expected to think that there should be exceptions. Like, these kids, because they have a physical disadvantage already, should get a pass, but they don't.
It's really disgusting to me that celebrities and artists all over the world take so much from Black culture but won't even speak on what the fuck is going on in Congo. There's one artist in particular who's really disappointed me, who released an album that used a whole bunch of like Afro beats and African influence and had a whole pro-Black era, and then became the Tiffany Diamond Girl and now hasn't said anything about Congo. But as regular people, there's some things we can do to help. You can use this filter, you can use the sound that I'm using. You can stop vaping. It's already bad for you and makes you ugly, so now you guys have a real reason to stop. There's a company called Fairphone, and they say that they use fair and ethical practices to get their minerals and their materials for their phones. You can also get refurbished electronics. There's this website I like to use called Backmarket. You can also repost anything that you see about it, use any filter that you see about it, use any sound that you see about it, spread the word, and free Congo.
You must have theories about what happened to Lucy Gray.
Where did my footprints go? And
Y'all, again, I've always said that when I watched the movie, I felt like at the end, her image was very translucent like a ghost. And so my theory was always that he was having hallucinations. He didn't actually see her. He didn't actually hear her. When she left out of that cabin, she sprinted up the block and she was gone. Y'all forget where she came from, who her tribe was. Literally that they were only in 12 because they were rounded up. Not because they wanted to be there, not because like they were born there. They were forced there. She's in a place now where they don't even know the location of. So you think that she won't escape that? Like, when she asked Snow to escape with her, she had an idea of where they were gonna go. He does not know the forest. Maybe he could retrace his steps on, like, where he was at that moment and how to get back to 12. But he's not gonna know the forest enough to know where she wanted to bring him. Like, they never discuss, hey, we're gonna go to this location on the map. Like, she never told him. So, once she was out the clear, you think she didn't sprint up the block? She for sure made it out alive. She for sure didn't get hit with a bullet, and she for sure, if those were her footprints, she for sure made those footprints to make it seem like that's the area she was in when she, in fact, wasn't. And most likely, those were not even her footprints. If they were her footprints, it's because she was trying to, I think, maybe swim away, if that's the case. But even then, I don't think those were her footprints. The Covey knows about that area. There was a few of them still left. They could have been running around the area from the previous day. And because it rained, you get that in the mud. You don't know if that was really her. Nonetheless, I think she escaped. And a lot of y'all want to be like, oh, there's no way because she got hit. Who said she got hit? When he got bit by that snake and he was roaming the forest looking for her, he had the gun. He thought he heard something, which probably was a mockingjay. Then he turned around and swore he saw her fall after he hit her with the bullet. Then don't you think that if she fell, he was not that far away from her where he couldn't see her try to get up and run away? Why was she not on the ground anymore? A lot of you guys don't think about that. Child, she made it out.
Hi, you're gonna watch this for 10 seconds, otherwise you're literally a piece of shit. So sit down and get comfortable, because here we go. It never ceases to amaze me how every time something awful is happening, people always come up with an excuse as to why they can't participate. And the fact that the latest excuse is boycott fatigue is absolutely fucking ludicrous, and you should be ashamed of yourself if that's your reasoning. Boycott fatigue? You're telling me that consumerism has you so tightly by the balls that you can't avoid consumerism in your day-to-day life? Like, you can't not buy a burger or a shitty overpriced coffee or some doughy-ass pizza? Like, it's not that hard. You're talking about boycott fatigue. Would you give the same excuse if this boycott were to save children who are being massacred by the lack of gun laws here in America? If this was for kids here at home, would you still give the same excuse? I don't think you would. I don't think you would, but it's cowardice and it's lazy. And if you want to be a piece of shit, you can do that. But don't sit here and call it boycott fatigue. Say it with your chest. I just want y'all to stand for something. Just stand for something. Stand the fuck up. Stand for something. Or you will fall for everything. Everything. Okay? The U.S. and Israeli governments are like this. Okay? They are like that. They are like that. And the fact that we are sitting here and people are like, oh my God, it's so hard for me to not buy my favorite pinkity drinkity. People are losing their eyes, their sense of smell, their sense of touch, their limbs, their loved ones, their health, their hope, their faith. And you are sitting here bitching about a fucking drink. And if you don't stand now, you're letting these people know that it's okay to walk all over you next. I understand this sentiment. I fully get what you're saying, and I want you to fully understand what I'm saying. If you don't know what's happening, it's either because you're not on socials or you are actively choosing to not pay attention. I'm yelling at the people who are repeatedly choosing to not pay attention. And a lot of you are in the comments like, you didn't have to yell at me. Oh my God, that was so mean. You could have said that nicer. I could have. But then there wouldn't be as many of you in the comments being mad as shit. And I got the engagement up. The whole point is to spread awareness, because clearly, based on the comments, there are a lot of people who still don't know what's going on. Is that all willingness? No. Sometimes you just don't know what's happening. And I've been going through and I've been responding to people's comments. This is not something to sugarcoat, okay? I would hope that if me and my family and the people in my community, I'm from Philly. Let's say Philly is getting bombed. And we're going to say that because the government did drop a bomb on Philly back in the 80s. Y'all can go look that up. They bombed like 2 whole blocks in West Philly to get rid of these people who weren't a threat at all. I would hope that if I were in a situation where such extreme violence was being thrust upon me and the people I care about, I would hope that someone who's seeing this would be just as outraged as I am. Well, if I know I'm going to die because these people above me just have it out for me, I would hope that in my departure, somebody would be outraged at the fact that life was stolen from me. This is not something that you should be passive about. That's my whole point. And I know y'all are like, well, you could have just said it like that. You didn't have to be angry. The TikTok creator beta program only collects revenue if you get a legit view, which is about 10 seconds. That's why you see so many people posting now. It's like, watch this for 10 seconds if you care. You know, and I'm sorry that so many of you were guilt tripped, but it worked for a lot of people. Maybe it didn't work for you, but it worked for a lot of people. Will I say I'm sorry? Absolutely fucking not. No. No. I will continue to yell about this. I will continue to be angry about this because you should be angry. As I said before, if you don't stand now for this, our government is going to make sure we never stand ever again. I don't know if y'all have noticed, but living in the United States is living in the belly of the beast. And I was talking with my classmate about this today. We are at such a dystopian point in history right now. We are literally like tiptoeing the line of the Hunger Games. I feel like I live in the Capitol and I'm watching people get blown up in District 12. Sometimes art imitates life and vice versa. You see what I'm saying? Like, what we're watching right now is insane and should only happen in fiction. But it's happening in real life. So you should be angry. You should be outraged. You should be doing everything you can to make sure that this doesn't continue to happen. I mean, like, 9/11 happened. Everybody was like, never forgive, never forget. The Holocaust happened. Never forgive, never forget. This is happening. The genocide in Congo is happening. The Uyghur Muslims have been suffering in China for over 5 years. That's been happening. It's a lot of things going on. And if it's not central to whiteness, y'all don't seem to care. So I'm allowed to get angry about it. And if that makes me an angry black woman, guess what? You can kiss this peanut butter ass. Mwah. Bye.
Truly nothing could have prepared me for what I found when I set out to research this, so just buckle up. Full disclosure, I've not been out in the streets for about 13 years now, so everything I've gathered has come from either online publications and articles. I don't think I can screenshot them because they use the word corn too much, but if you want, I can definitely tell you how to find them. The other part of my research has come from reading anecdotal experiences from women in like women-only subreddits and women's spaces on TikTok and elsewhere on the internet. First and foremost, the odds are a little bit stacked against you because 99% of men have viewed corn in their life. Of course, that does not mean they're an addict or that they watch it even on a regular basis, but think about that as a general rule. Like most men that you will come across have been exposed to at some point probably humiliating, degrading, and vile treatment of women in the bedroom. That itself is bad enough. As far as statistics for regular use, 57% of men just ages 30 to 49 have reported using pornography in the past month, and 42% have admitted to using it in the past week. Mind you, these are just 30 to 49-year-old men. We're not talking about men in their 20s. The first sign I'm going to give you is extremely anecdotal, but I think it's honestly one of the best ways to be able to tell, especially if you pride yourself on having good intuition. A lot of times you can tell by the eyes, the way that they look at you and other women. A lot of men who have issues with corn have this certain like dead look in their eyes, absent. There's just like nobody home, especially when they look at women. And it's typically because their brain has been so cornified that they can't perceive women as human beings or as something interesting to like engage with or engage in conversation with. They just see women as objects for pleasure. And therefore they don't have the same kind of curiosity. They don't have the same kind of honestly life in their eyes that men who are not obsessed with that stuff will tend to, look at you. They'll tend to be curious. They'll tend to look around, like think of like a deer, versus like, I don't know, fucking alligator or something. This is another anecdotal one, but I think these first couple will honestly be the most helpful. But a lot of women lately report that even when they go to like kiss somebody at the end of a first date, a lot of men now just start choking them like right away. Like when kissing or making out. You have to remember that that is the same thing that somebody would do if they were trying to unalive you. And the fact that men are going into it with no consent, with the fact that it's happening so quickly, they're not even waiting to get into the bedroom and like, tell you about preferences or anything like that. They just literally will start trying to cut your airways off. That is absolutely insane. And you need to safely get out of that situation as soon as you are able to. He has become so far separated from actual reality and is so far embedded into corn reality that he's too far gone. He's too far gone for normal human relations. Next sign is he trying to get you into the bedroom right away? When you watch corn, there is really not a whole lot of downtime between when the people first meet and are introduced to each other to the point which they're engaging in relations with one another. And so someone, again, who has lost track of reality, someone who has seen this kind of risky behavior, of course, it's not risky for the people engaging in it on video. They go through regular checks, use protection and stuff like that. But for most people, like that is inappropriate. Like I just met you. We are absolutely not going to do the most physically vulnerable thing that one can do with a stranger. Immediately post like dinner or like first date coffee, like they're trying to come up. Like that is, please stop and think about how unhinged and unsafe that is. Especially as a woman, this person is probably bigger than you. This person is probably more aggressive than you in the bedroom. So you need to really vet people before you let them in to that vulnerable space, because that's a space where you can get hurt. That's a space where your boundaries can be easily disrespected, the space in which you are vulnerable and you can't really protect yourself when it comes down to it. So please just be very careful. I'm not trying to be, negative or shame anybody. I'm just trying to make sure that you know how to protect yourself. If you are out with this person in public, please do not dismiss any sort of rude or overly intense staring at other women. Please don't be naive, because I know a lot of women are like, oh, it's okay if my man, is staring, and I do it too, and I even tell him which ones to like look at. That's not normal. First of all, think about the women. Women don't like to be stared at or over, okay? We want to just exist. So if you want to be with a man who is okay with actively making other women uncomfortable, that's your prerogative. But I'm telling you that also probably means that he is a corn addict and that he thinks that women exist for his staring and for his pleasure and for his sick little imagination. You'll notice that it's really the only way or the only time that he even gives attention to women. Because once again, he doesn't see them as human beings. So if you want to end up with a man like this, that's fine. Just know what your lot is going to be in life. Because this is not going to stop, and this is the only way that he will ever validate you even. So you'll always find yourself in competition with these women. And you'll always know that he's probably thinking about somebody else when he's engaging in physical relations with you. Next, watch very carefully how he talks to you. Do not write anything off as weird or edgy humor if it feels actually disrespectful, or if it feels like he's trying to nag you. Do not fall into the trap of trying to impress a man like that, because this is a man who's trying to set you up so that you need his validation. He's trying to push your emotional boundaries and the boundaries of how you view yourself and how you want to be respected, and he wants to see what he can get away with. Because a lot of times in corn, the women are very much disrespected and very much nagged, and these men will often not be able to help themselves, and they'll start making these comments towards and around you. That's when you need to run. You need to get out. Also, watch out for him trying to pit you against other women. So if you show up to a date and he's like, oh, I love that you're dressed so modestly, not like these other sluts out here, run. If you show up wearing something a little more revealing and he is like making weird or unwelcome comments about that, instead of just, giving a compliment and like moving on, just watch out, because there's something that he feels like he is owed with women, or something that he feels like women do in order to invite attention other than just exist. It just shows an unhealthy pattern of thinking towards women. God forbid things have escalated into the bedroom. One of the first things they'll do is, once again, they'll try to either cut off your airway. A lot of women report just men will just slap you in bed. No warning. Men will just spit on you in bed. No warning. No asking for consent. Nothing. They will take off protection and not tell you until later. Like, you just have to find out the hard way. Just trying all sorts of, like, slipping it into the wrong place. Like, all of these are telltale signs, because all of these things require consent and talking about it beforehand. Most of the time when you go to bed with someone, you are consenting to the start of that experience. And every step of the way from there should feel natural and should feel like co-regulatory. So not like somebody is just doing whatever they want and you just have to deal with it. You have a say in that too. Hope and pray that it doesn't get to that point, because that's the point when it is the most difficult to leave. A lot of victims of this kind of assault freeze up and are unable to feel safe, like telling that person about it or stopping the act. And it often results in trauma and inability to feel safe in that situation moving forward. So another pretty surefire sign is this, especially on a regular basis, especially if they're otherwise healthy, especially if they don't really warn you about it, because it's something that a lot of them tend to be ashamed about, and they know that there's no reason why it reasonably should be happening other than the fact that they have trained it to only perform with a death grip. A woman's body is no longer good enough without all the lighting, without all the makeup, without all the angles, without everything that, you know, porn stars bring to the table. Mind you, they offer none of what the male porn star brings to the table, like a big corn on the cob, or the ability to perform for a long time, or the ability to, you know, stay alert while they're performing, a nice body. Those things are required of male porn stars. They don't bring any of that to the table. That they won't be able to perform unless you look like a porn star. And unless all the conditions of like a cornified experience are somehow met, which is very difficult to do without a whole team on set. This is very traumatizing to experience, being used as a means to an end, but it's another surefire way to be able to tell. So if none of these other things are happening, but you feel like your experience was not important, you feel like maybe they didn't try to look at you, they didn't try to engage with you, they kept their eyes closed, they were like physically there but emotionally like completely detached, they are having to think of corn instead of your body in order to finish, which is very traumatizing, very disturbing. And it is like, I think it's a form of abuse, because you are actually being used. And like, your pleasure is not concerning to this person, and therefore you're not getting anything out of it, and they are, which means it's at your expense. So that is an abuse of what is supposed to be an intimate act between two people, an intimate and most importantly vulnerable act. So they are not being vulnerable with you, and they are not letting you be vulnerable with them. They're using you as a means to an end. So if your pleasure is not cared for, if your boundaries are not cared for, if consent is not asked for, if, you know, they're not checking in with you throughout, they're using you as a means to an end. Last but not least, what's at the heart of all this is just emotional immaturity. It's the inability to cope with life as life presents itself to them. It's the need to escape. It's the need to have things go their way, even if it's not going their way. This is the reason for a lot of different types of addiction. This emotional immaturity. It's the inability to cope with and sit with your own feelings. It's the inability to process the things that happen to you without turning to some other form of a dopamine rush or escapism to order to avoid dealing with what you need to be dealing with. So this person typically won't take no for an answer. They'll typically say insensitive things and claim it was just a joke, or then gaslight you about it, or say that they didn't say it, or say that you misunderstood them. This will be someone that can't deal with rejection, that can't deal with boundaries. This will be someone who blames their shortfalls on other things, other people, other factors, someone who doesn't take responsibility for their own life, for how they spend their time, for what they do with themselves. They seem to just blame other people. All of that will point to, if not a corn addiction, then some other type of addiction in this person's life. And you will want to avoid them altogether, just based on that. This is for the people that's always saying, move your head, move your head. Here you go. You can screenshot it. Sorry about that. I love you. If you have any more, add them in the comments. And stay safe out there. Godspeed.
There is a big fat reason why you do not see any person standing up for Palestinian genocide right now deleting their videos, but you see an influx of creators that for some reason sympathize with white colonialism, constantly deleting comments, constantly deleting their videos, constantly rephrasing their videos. It's because no matter how you say it, how you do it, whatever you need to sleep at night, nothing you say is right. It's not fucking right. 4,327. 4,327 Palestinian kids that have died. Just because they're brown, they don't deserve an infographic. They don't deserve a repost. We're not asking you to single-handedly lead a revolution. We're asking you to repost an Instagram page that has already been made. An Instagram post that has already been created just so it can be easily shared. It has also been over a month. 1 month. Something that should have been called ceasefire 3 days later. And I'm being generous with the 3 days later. It has been 1 month. And it's because you cannot simply put yourself in the shoes of a Palestinian person right now and imagine yourself pulling rubble off of your kid just to get them out, that you cannot understand the situation fully. And for that, I feel sorry. I feel sorry that you have to be in a physical situation just so you can empathize with others. That is sick. What is happening right now is catastrophic. It is horrific. It is evil. And you can't be bothered to post an infographic. Why? Because it doesn't go along with your aesthetic. It doesn't go along with the brand deals you have. It doesn't go along with the white colonialism your parents have been teaching you from this age and further on. If your full-time job is to create a concept for an ad and then post it for over 10K, the least you can do is read an article in between. That is the very fucking least. What's going on is disheartening. And history repeats itself again and again and again and again. Except instead of very ignorant white Americans just constantly watching their TV and going to work and exercising the idea of the nuclear family, we have influencers that can't be bothered to use their platform for something that's real, for something that's happening right now. Instead, we are making hypotheticals. I don't care if you don't like me. I don't care if you unfollow me. I don't care if you unmutual me, but can you at least just sit down for 1 second of the day and relish in the idea of your privilege? Just sit down and think about it. Think about how much privilege you have to even just be watching this video and scroll and unfollow me.
Nice people don't date mean people. I say date. They obviously can get entangled in abusive relationships. Nice people do not seek out mean people. Mean people are attracted to nice people, but unless, like I said, abuse, you are not returning that. There isn't going to be a relationship because you do not go together. You click at the waiter, I raise my hand. You litter, I put the litter in the bin. We don't go together. Now, people agree with me on this. Are you going to agree with what I'm about to say? Harry Styles and James Corden. How many reports have there been of James Corden being... What's my point? My point is, who's James's best friend, especially since James moved back to London? Who was he seen cycling around with? Harry Styles. Who has he been seen at restaurants with? Harry Styles. He was telling me Harry's never witnessed James be rude to the servers? He has. He has. He doesn't care. So who might not be as nice as we think? Look, I'm just putting it out there. Hate me if you want.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't 2 years ago our government went on a fucking rampage to rip away women's reproductive rights and take away abortions to save the children that don't exist, the children that are fictional, that aren't alive, right? But they won't help the children of Palestine who are getting bombed and murdered and missiled and walking around with missing limbs. So now riddle me this. Is it A, because you really don't give a fuck about the children? B, you just want to have power over someone? Or is it C, those children don't matter because they don't like your children? Is it perhaps because those children are brown? Or they're Palestinian? Or they're Muslim? Which one is it? I'm just asking questions.
The thing is, how are men supposed to value friendships with women if when they're a little boy they make friends with a girl and the adults around them are like, "Oh, is that your girlfriend?" And even just variations upon that, let's say they're inviting their male friend Charlie and their female friend Lexi round to play. Oh, who are you inviting round? Okay, Charlie. Oh, and Lexi. Oh, nice. Oh, Lexi. It's signalling to that child that their friendship with this girl is not the same as their friendship with this boy. And on top of that, you're embarrassing them. Using this kind of like, ooh, teasy tone and language is embarrassing them. And it's really hardwiring in their heads that being friends with girls is embarrassing.
You know what? In a couple years, nobody is going to call him Simone Biles' husband. They'll call me Jonathan Owen's wife.
Speaking of, no, we won't. no, we won't.
So I saw an early screening of Napoleon yesterday, and there's a lot I could say about this film. But first and foremost, we need to talk about Josephine, because what the fuck was this? I haven't been so pissed off at the way a female character was represented in a movie, and I don't even know how long. This was genuinely really upsetting. I'm not gonna lie. I have so much respect for Ridley Scott. I really do. I love a lot of his films, and I understand that he doesn't want to have the historical accuracy conversation, and I don't give a fuck if he wants to depict cannons firing into the pyramids of Egypt. I'm not a historian. It's an artistic choice as far as I'm concerned. Go off, Queen. This is something entirely different, though. The way that Josephine's character was treated in this film, from like a metaphorical and a literal historical standpoint, is just so upsetting. I thought she wasn't going to be in the movie that much because he'd already said that he had a longer cut in mind, classic Ridley Scott, that has more Josephine. So I thought, you know, oh, well, maybe she's not going to be in it very much. I wasn't expecting a whole lot in terms of the representation of the female characters. But as you can see, she's played by Vanessa Kirby. You know, the tagline on her poster is "The World for Josephine," and she really is a very integral part of the story. A lot of the film centers around, you know, her and her relationship with Napoleon, and it's kind of presented as like the main motivation for Napoleon to, you know, be the man that he was. You would think that that would mean that she at least has a chance of becoming a well-developed character, but she really doesn't. We know almost nothing about her. That's not the worst part, though. I was already not thrilled when I found out about the casting for this movie because Vanessa Kirby is 15 years younger than 49-year-old Joaquin Phoenix, who is playing a Napoleon who's supposed to be in his late 20s, early 30s in most of this film. But also, in real life, Josephine was 6 years older than Napoleon. So that is a 20-year reverse age gap that they have manufactured in the wrong direction, which is just fucking a weird fucking choice. It's classic Hollywood and already annoying. The thing is, casting this woman 20 years younger than she should have been in relation to the casting of Napoleon makes her story entirely different in context. Like the fact that Napoleon was absolutely obsessed with and enamored with her, couldn't get enough of her, and the fact that she overcame this like ridiculous societal power imbalance matters a lot. That she was actually older than him. That's a very significant story point. And so much of her story, the actual like main part of her story in this film, which I didn't know until I watched the film because I'm not a history buff or anything, was the fact that she was literally too old to bear Napoleon children. She was too old to give him an heir. And because, like, the film knows how ridiculous that talking point would seem having Vanessa Kirby in the cast, they completely skirt the issue. They never say the words she's too old or she's past her childbearing years. They say ambiguous things like she can't give you that anymore. And it seems absurd. And frankly, it's like really upsetting that a woman whose story is entirely about how women's most precious commodity is youth and beauty to an extent, but youth, and that was taken from her and she lost all of her power, and she was cast as someone so much younger than she actually was. That is like viscerally upsetting. It's just so exhausting and infuriating to consistently see women's stories, even when they're based on real fucking people, be so sanitized and airbrushed and fed through this filter of the male gaze. I mean, what an absolutely horrific irony that this real life woman, the undoing of her entire life, was reaching a point of social irrelevancy because she was too old to be of any value. And then 300 years later, in a biopic, she's represented by a woman 20 years younger than her love interest. Like, you literally cannot make this shit up. Jennifer Lawrence's career is a fascinating case study about the way Hollywood casts women regarding age. Every time I make a video talking about the way Hollywood casts women consistently younger than they are, especially in comparison to their male co-stars, I get men in my comments like this, although usually they have better grammar, but that's beside the point. But let's get into Jen's career, because boy, she had a great one, and it is very telling about the way Hollywood treats women. So when she came on the scene, Winter's Bone, all right? Incredible movie. She was young up-and-comer, only 20 years old, and she was Oscar nominated, okay? Very exciting. She's playing a teenager in this breakout film, indie film from Deborah Granick. And, you know, good for her. Very quickly, her career deservedly takes off. She gets X-Men First Class playing Mystique. She gets The Hunger Games, you know? She's playing teenagers, pretty common for young 20s actress, and she's doing fucking fantastic. Then comes Silver Linings Playbook. And yes, this can really all be traced back to David O. Russell, but let's not get into that right now. Silver Linings Playbook, she's 22 years old. She's playing opposite Bradley Cooper, who is 15 years older than her. Not only that, but Silver Linings Playbook is based on a book. And these two characters are broken people, you know, who are dealing with mental illness and grief and loss, and they find comfort in each other. It's a beautiful story. In theory, it could happen between people of any age, in theory. In the book, it doesn't, though. In the book, Tiffany, Jennifer Lawrence's character, is late 30s, just like Bradley Cooper's character, which makes sense. She's a widow. She's dealing with, age-appropriate things for that age. And then they cast her as a 22-year-old. You might say, oh, well, in the movie, they never say how old she is. Maybe she's supposed to be playing, a late 30s version of Tiffany who's just extraordinarily youthful. And to that, I say that sucks. That also really sucks because that perpetuates these wildly unrealistic beauty standards. And again, this whole, the visuals of the two of them together creates this idea that men, even when they're in their late 30s, are supposed to be with women who look like this. It's not great. Jennifer is so good in this role. She's so good in all of her roles. She's a wildly talented actress. Her talent is not the item in question here. The thing is, there are many, many equally talented, age-appropriate Hollywood actresses who don't get roles like this because they're going to 22-year-olds. And then it happened again the very next year. Weird that it happened twice, right? American Hustle by David O. Russell. Jennifer Lawrence is 23 years old, playing opposite love interest Christian Bale, who is 16 years older than her. And the role that she's playing was, again, written for a mid to late 30s woman because she's playing a bitter, jaded housewife. Again, she does a fantastic job with the role, but it feels completely different than what it was intended to be. And this, again, it just feels completely age inappropriate. And then third time's the charm for David O. Russell, I guess. In 2015, Jennifer Lawrence is 25. The movie Joy, based on a real person, Joy Manganiello, I think. She invented a mop. Anyways, apparently it's intentionally supposed to be only partially based on reality. He imagined the rest of a story. Apparently he couldn't imagine casting someone who was actually the age of the woman who did it. But, I guess Jennifer Lawrence really had to play this role for some reason. By the way, this is the same year that the last Hunger Games movie came out. This whole time she's playing a teenager convincingly in other movies. But then people did what they love to do, and even though she was widely beloved, people turned on her and said she was cringe or, bad for whatever reason, and she stepped out of the spotlight for a while. And then she came back. What was her big comeback movie when the public was ready for her to step back into the spotlight? She's coming back as a woman in her 30s, as a mother. It's a movie about how gross and old she is compared to her romantic love interest. Someone who she is 12 years older than. I know in the movie he's supposed to be playing like a teenager. He was 20 in real life. She's 12 years older than him, which is 3 years younger than the age difference she had with Bradley Cooper in Silver Linings Playbook when she was 22. And just for the record, I'm not suggesting that age gaps like are depicted in this movie should be normalized in any way. It's just really interesting to me to see how they're portrayed when the gender is reversed. And it's worth noting that I think No Hard Feelings in particular is actually a pretty thoughtful and nuanced take on the subject matter, and I think it's a pretty cute movie. And I think Jennifer Lawrence is a wonderful actress with a great career that I've enjoyed following. But when you look at just her career as an example, how can you deny that this is a glaringly obvious issue that only affects one gender? And the video that you commented on is about Napoleon, where they cast Napoleon's wife with an actress 14 years younger than Joaquin Phoenix, when in reality, she was 7 years older than him. Even when it's a historical biopic based on actual real-life precedent, they find a way to cast a woman over a decade younger than the man. Come the fuck on.